$500 million. That's how much a federal judge in the United States has ordered North Korea to pay Otto Warmbier's family in their wrongful death lawsuit. Warmbier was 22 years old. He was on a tour of North Korea in 2016 when he was arrested for stealing a poster. Yes, you remember that. The regime released him a year later. He was in a coma when he arrived back in the States. He died days later. North Korea has not responded to the ruling. But will they pay? Joining me right now is former federal prosecutor and CNN legal analyst Shan Wu. Shan, great to see you. Thank you for being here. The federal judge awards the Warmbier family $500 million from North Korea. Are they ever going to see any of that money, do you think?
They may be able to see some of it, Kate. I think that Judge Howell really reacted to the anguishing nature of this case. I represent so many college students, and this is such a worst-case scenario for the family. It's really going to end up being somewhat of a diplomatic issue. The legal analysis is this was a default judgment. Most of the countries that are sued under these exceptions to foreign sovereign immunities don't show up. So it's a default judgment, and now it's going to be a collections question. And there are some North Korean assets in the country. They'd have to be identified and seized. But ultimately, this is probably going to be a diplomatic solution rather than a solution in the courts.
And how do the Warmbiers go about, if there are North Korean assets that are frozen in the States, how do they go about getting access to that? What's the process?
Well, first, they have to identify what the assets are, and then they would have to file legal papers using the federal court judgment to essentially put a lien on those assets and try to seize them. The more practical solution and more realistic one, although very time-consuming, is what happened, if you remember, in the Lockerbie, Scotland bombing, where after years of litigation, finally Libya basically caved into international pressure and entered a settlement for a couple of $1 billion there for the murders of some 270 people in that bombing.
And Shan, one attorney who has worked with victims of international terror attacks in looking at this case says that cases like this are actually less about the money and more about acting as a deterrent. Do you agree?
Yes, that's right. And also the nature of the bulk of this award was $150 million in punitive damages to the estate, $150 million in punitive damages to the parents. And they distinguish in these personal injury cases between punitive and compensatory. Compensatory for actual out-of-pocket loss or the loss of the value of such a young life. Punitive is meant to send a lesson. It's meant to deter. And that's the real value of these large sums. Whether or not they ever collect, be great if they do, they should. But the real message is to try to tell these countries you cannot engage in this kind of massacre of innocent people.
Even with that judgment, though, brings very little solace to that poor family who's gone through so much. Shan, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you, Kate.